Hi, I'm Jenny. I'm the Environmental Education Specialist at Olivewood Gardens and Learning Center. Today, we're going to be making a compost bucket, and it's really simple, and it will be perfect for any size home. Okay, so if you have a small home or a large home, this is a small way that you can do a good thing for the environment. So this is the compost bucket that we'll be making, and so for this you will need 2 5-gallon buckets. These buckets can be found at home improvement stores and even large stores like Walmart or Target. 5-gallon buckets. You need 2 of them. You also need a lid for the buckets. So this lid was about $1, and it goes on and off my bucket easy. Okay. You'll also need a drill, and in that drill you'll need a 1/8 inch bit. You'll also need a Sharpie and adult permission if you are a kid. Okay, let's get started. Diverting as much waste as we can from the landfills is one way to help make the world a better place. Composting is one way that we can take plant matter and other organics, and we can recycle them and turn them into nutritious soil. So instead of putting your food scraps into the trash can where it will go to a landfill and rot, you put it into a compost pile, and it will decompose and it will turn right back into earth. Okay, and by keeping plant waste and organic matter out of the landfill, we are reducing the amount of methane emissions in the environment. So it is one way that you can help make the world a better place. This compost bucket has got holes in it. Okay, and I use my drill to make these holes, and that's because compost likes an aerobic environment. That means it needs some air, and it actually needs water for it to decompose. If we didn't have holes in our bucket, and we put our plant matter and our food waste in here, it would just rot. And when food rots, it is anaerobic. That's because there is no air in it. Okay, and when that happens, that's what causes the methane emissions. So we want to be sure that there's lots of air that's able to circulate in here so that our food decomposes, and it'll be perfect. So we're going to take one of our buckets. Now, if you can't find if you don't have 2 buckets that are the same color, that's okay. I chose 2 gray buckets. So we're going to be drilling lots and lots of holes in the inner bucket, okay? So you're gonna wanna choose the color bucket for the outside and set it aside. All right, so we're gonna be taking the inner bucket. This is the bucket that we're not really gonna see too much, and we're going to start by drilling holes in it. So I'm gonna turn the bucket upside down and set it on a flat surface, and I'm going to get my drill, and I'm going to start drilling holes about 1 inch apart. Now when I turn on my drill, I'm going to go down into the plastic, and then I'm going to keep my finger on that trigger as I pull the drill bit out so that it comes out without my drill getting trapped inside. Now you're going to notice when you use your drill, you're going to come up with a lot of these little tiny plastics. Okay, little tiny plastics, and that's because we're taking some of the plastic away from the bucket. We want to be sure that we don't just toss these onto the ground, because when water washes it away, it'll go down into our rain gutters and end up in our ocean. So we just want to be sure that we're very careful with those pieces and make sure that they get into the trash. Okay? So I'm going to keep going. lots of holes about 1 inch apart on the bottom of my compost bucket. This is going to be sure that air gets into my bucket, and it's also going to allow any moisture, excess moisture, drip out of my bucket. Okay? Next, I'm going to be making holes all along the outside of my bucket. This is going to, again, allow air to get inside and aerate my compost. So I'm just going to choose a side, and I'm going to start about 2/3 of the way up and go all the way down 1 inch apart. Looks good. I'm going to keep going all the way around the outside of my compost bucket. Okay, so I've got my holes going all around the outside of my bucket. I did mine in straight lines, but you don't have to. You just need to be sure that your holes, that you've got plenty of holes, and they could be up to 1 inch apart. Okay, so now I've got holes all around my compost bucket. This is what's going to be holding the goods. Now we've got our outside bucket. Okay, so the bucket that I've got that sits outside, I've actually labeled with compost. So what we're going to do is we're going to label the outer bucket so everybody knows that's where we're going to put our compost. And I'm also going to put a few air holes along the outside. The reason why we put some air holes on the outside is so that more air gets in, and also so that our bucket, our actual compost bucket, is very easy to get in and out, okay, because of the air. So just right along the outside of the bottom, I measure from about the second knuckle up, and that's where I'm going to put my holes. So I've got holes all around the outside of my bucket, and so now my compost bucket sits inside and it comes in and out very easy. Another reason why we want that on the inside of our compost bucket is because just like this compost bucket I have here, see, whenever there's little drippies, it'll actually catch it on the inside, okay? So that if it's sitting on your back porch or on your front porch or even inside your kitchen, you don't have to worry about any mess. All right, so now I'm going to label my bucket. So we're gonna just label our outside bucket, the one with the row of holes on the outside. So I'm gonna label it with a Sharpie. If your bucket's dark, you can use a chalk marker or a white paint marker. All right, I've labeled my bucket compost, so we know that that's what's inside. Now we have to put some holes in our lid. Now I'll show you. I not only labeled my lid compost so we know that that's what it is when we look down, but I've also put lots of holes about 1 inch apart on that as well. So let's do it. What I would suggest is just putting that lid on top of your bucket so that when you use your drill, you're not damaging any of your furniture. I'm gonna label that too. Okay, so our compost bucket's complete. Now let's start composting. The first thing that you do when you're starting a compost is to find some green matter and some brown matter, okay? So all plants that are living, like food scraps. So I've got some old herbs in here. I've got a piece of cucumber that wasn't eaten and some peel. I also have a cinnamon stick or herbs and spices. I actually also have eggs, okay? All of these things will be perfect in our compost. These are green matter, as well as leaves from trees that are green and plants from my garden when I'm finished with it. So we also need brown matter. So fallen leaves, anything that's dry, dried up plant matter, and like wood chips, those are all brown matter. So the green matter is going to add nitrogen into our compost, okay? And bacteria likes to eat these things. And the brown matter, fungi likes to eat the brown matter, okay? And that puts carbon into our soil. So we're going to use 2 to 3 times the amount of brown matter that we have of our green matter. And when you're starting your compost, you want to lay a bed of maybe twigs and leaves, just some items that will keep your compost up off the bottom of your bucket first, okay? So when bacteria is eating these things, like this big old chunk of cucumber here, bacteria is going to love munching on this, and it's going to take quite a while because this is a large piece. So what it's good to do is make sure that all your pieces are really, really small. So what I would do with something like this is I would cut it up. So I've got something, you could use a knife, you could even put your food scraps in a food processor to make them really small, but I'm just going to cut these up into smaller pieces so that bacteria can eat on all sides of it, and it'll take less time for it to decompose. Okay, so I'm just going to make these pieces small. For my egg, I'm just going to crunch it up into smaller pieces again so that it's so that it'll decompose quicker. And then for all of my brown matter, I'm going to crunch it up with my hands. Okay, so I'm going to start by layering in my brown matter. So I'm going to layer it in, a nice layer. Okay, a nice good layer. Then I'm going to take my food scraps. Okay, all the food scraps, and this is something that we keep on the counter, and we just save all of our food scraps in this, and then when it's time to put it in the compost, we can just walk it out and drop it in. So I'm going to go ahead and place all my food scraps in there, and then I'm going to, like a sandwich, add more brown matter to it, okay? So I'm going to put more brown matter on the top. We want to be sure that we're putting about 2 times to 3 times the brown matter in as we do the green matter, okay? So lots more of the dried stuff. Other things that you could use for brown matter are boxes. I got a shipment, and the shipment came in a box. This box is made out of cardboard. Cardboard is paper, and it comes from a tree. This is perfect for us to compost. I also have newspaper, like a newsletter, so these things too. And remember, we want to go ahead and rip it up into small pieces. This is something that you could do and store in a box so that when it's time to compost, you have it ready. So I'm going to go ahead and put all that in. If you don't rip it into small pieces, that's okay. It's just going to take it's going to take longer for your compost to turn into soil. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. One more. Newspapers, white paper is good. Little wood chips, all that is good stuff. Okay, then lastly, tea bags and coffee grounds. So sometimes Starbucks has coffee grounds that are available, or maybe you drink coffee or tea at home. Those can go right into the compost. So I'm going to drop that in. And then you could use a stick or your hands to give it a little stir. You're going to put your lid on top. and you're going to keep it in a shaded place, okay? So that could be right inside your back door. That could also be outside under a tree. It depends on your space. This can, and then you want to keep it closed and let it do its thing, okay? So I wouldn't recommend that you go out every single day with scraps for your compost. You want to save them up for a few days, okay? Because every time you open up your compost bin, moisture goes away from it, okay? And you want to let the decomposing process happen, and in about 6 weeks this is going to turn into soil. So isn't that magical? This is just one way that you can take all your food scraps and turn it into something that is good for the earth. And if you don't have a yard or plants in order to feed with the compost that you have, ask a neighbor or a family member or a friend. They might have plants or a garden that they could use your good soil for, okay? All right, well, I hope you had fun today, and go ahead and make yourself a compost bin. And look, now I've got 2. Have fun. See you later. Bye. All right, the one thing that I wanted to mention is that bacteria and fungus are going to help this compost decompose. Some people ask, well, do I need worms in order to compost? And the answer is sure, you could have worms. Worms will help munch up all of the goodness that's inside this compost bucket and help it decompose quicker, but you don't need worms in order to compost, okay? It'll take a little bit longer for it to happen, but the bacteria and fungus that is doing its thing in here and having a little party is going to do a great job of turning all of these food scraps and plant matter right back into soil.